Rolling now, so whenever you're ready, you can give your introduction.
Okay, my name is Kit Nielsen. Never mind, try that again. That's my maiden name. All right, take two. My name is Kit Kechejian. I just taught a science lesson in a 4th grade classroom on electricity. It was the second part of an introductory lesson for the unit. The students had just finished up a unit on magnetism. I don't know what else you want me to say. Sorry.
Okay. No, take a pause.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to do that again?
Yeah, let's do it one more time. It's still rolling.
And just stop when...
Yeah, just stop and just keep looking at the camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Kit Kechejian. I just taught a 4th grade lesson in a science classroom. We did a lesson on electricity. It was an introductory lesson for the unit. The students have recently finished up a unit on magnetism, and they are working on the overall standard of energy being transformed.
And tell us, since we didn't get it the first time, why don't you talk to us really quickly? What did you taught last week? So tell us a little bit about that.
Last week was the introduction to the lesson. I was using the same text on the basic components of an electrical circuit. And what I asked the students to do is really focus in on a particular text structure that the author used in order to relay a more difficult concept for the students to understand, in which the author used a mental model. I focused on that primarily because it is one of the use of models is one of the 8 scientific practices in the new framework. And so getting students more familiar with that text structure, why authors use it, and how it helps them comprehend more difficult or abstract scientific ideas is really critical. We've found that students tend to pull out main ideas or gloss over areas of nonfiction text that they don't understand, and really being able to comprehend and break apart a model in a scientific text is critical to their understanding. And so teaching the students what to do with it and how to build their own understanding off of it, we found is really an essential piece of reading that nonfiction scientific text.
Good, great. And we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. First question is, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it? Okay,
since it's primarily a science lesson, this is the introductory lesson into the electrical component of their unit on electricity and magnetism. They've completed the unit on magnetism, and historically they would move into electromagnets. However, for the purpose of introducing more of the science practices into instruction, as well as becoming more comfortable with incorporating the shifts the CCSS calls for, we determined that we would reorder the unit so that the students built their understanding of magnetism, electricity, and then moved into electromagnetism. Because it was one of the things that we noted is in the text that we were pulling for the students to use, that they needed the understanding of both components before they had to comprehend electromagnetism. So that drove our instructional decisions in our pacing and timing of that unit.
Great. Question. Is the text used in this lesson part of a sequence of text designed to build skills and knowledge? If so, give an example of other texts that form this sequence.
Okay. Finding text to incorporate the CCSF shifts in science is an interesting problem right now in the elementary classrooms, simply because the traditional way of teaching science has been more of the inquiry-based model. We use several kit-based science curriculums where the students will do an inquiry piece first, and then the teacher will really kind of backfill the information the students need in terms of the academic language, in terms of the content. So currently, finding text is a bit of a challenge. The other piece that I've noticed is that the influx of the new standards written on the national framework, we're still in Connecticut waiting for the adoption of those new standards. So we don't have access to publisher's text that really match both the Lexile level called for by the CCSS as well as our Connecticut standards, which was one of the challenges that I had trying to find texts that do fit these units. Typically, if the Lexile level matches the rigor called for in the standards, the content, the science content contained within that text tends to be much more sophisticated. For example, looking at texts that would have been appropriate for electricity, the texts at the appropriate Lexile level got into the concepts of protons and electrons and neutrons, which is completely outside of our standards at the 4th grade level in Connecticut, and also really conceptually inappropriate for 4th graders. So we are building libraries of text, but we're also looking forward to when the publishers can kind of catch up to what the CCS has called for, as well as the next generation science standards.
Coming in a little tighter. Okay, good. Next question. Talk about the standards targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
The science standards are the Common Core.
Let's go with Common Core.
Let me grab my papers, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you want me to pause for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about the standards targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
Okay, the Common Core standards that I was targeting in this lesson were a standard where students would refer to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and in drawing inferences from the text, as well as explaining essentially concepts in a scientific text, including what happened and why, based on specific information in the text. And finally, determining the meaning of general academic and specific domain-specific words or phrases in a text relevant to a 4th grade topic. I designed the lesson in order for students to really dig into the text and be able to pull out details that not only define the words, but also relate the key ideas of those words together. The graphic organizer went beyond the typical just define the words, or where the students would key into bold words or the text coming right in before or after, but really asked them to distinguish what the important information about the words was that the author wanted them to understand. And I left that open-ended very specifically so that students wouldn't stop just at the first idea. This was an area that I noticed that students struggled with a little bit because they are more accustomed, especially in nonfiction text, to cue into those bold words, copy the definition with maybe not as much comprehension as we would really like, especially with our struggling readers. By asking them to determine what important information the author wanted us to know about those words, they had to tie in multiple points of the text together and really make a decision about what was key and what was not important in their view from the author's point of view.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies and why?
Okay. I think the lesson exemplified several of the core action indicators. Hang on, let me start that one again because I was just thinking of the ships.
You want me to pause?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Oh, I know what I forgot to tell you. Okay. Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies and why?
Okay, the core action indicator that I was really trying to target was cueing into the author's specific structure and designing the analysis around that. Again, as I had mentioned, often students cue into the more familiar text features that they're taught in terms of bolded words, possibly italicized words or the use of paragraphs, but they skip over a lot of key information, such as when the author uses models or examples or repeats words, or in this particular text structure, use paragraphs to organize the components of a circuit. By understanding this and looking at this text a lot closer than we would have in the past, students will be able to, over time, develop the habit and relay those skills to other scientific texts, and hopefully move away from skipping over the structures that the author put in there to really actually help them understand the more abstract ideas in the text.
We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your instruction. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Okay. The shifts required by the CCSS, excuse me, let me try that again. The shifts required by the CCSS have significantly impacted how I plan a science lesson. And specifically, as I said, historically we would start with a inquiry-based instructional model, often instigated with a hands-on activity, which, while engaging, I found made it difficult for kids to really apply the academic vocabulary that they needed, because that piece would come after the hands-on component. By putting the text in front of them, requiring them to do the heavy mental lifting, so to speak, of really breaking down that nonfiction information, gaining content through it, and then moving into the inquiry piece where they're doing the hands-on activity, what I'm able to do is really give them an opportunity to apply the academic vocabulary appropriately and in context. That allows me to address misconceptions, to reinforce their understanding, and to get them to a much deeper level of content understanding than I would have in the previous model. Oftentimes when students were in the hands-on piece, although they were very engaged, when we moved into the content piece after, that's where we saw some disengagement, and some students would even hold on to misconceptions that they had. By reversing the model, the learning is they're in the driver's seat, and they are applying their knowledge as they learn, which I find is to be very effective.
How did you teach the content of this lesson or this text prior to the CCSS? What's the same and what's different?
Okay. Prior to the CCSS, in science class at the elementary level, the primary delivery model of the content was really the classroom teacher. Following the hands-on lesson, the classroom teacher would maybe do a whole class lesson. They would chart the key vocabulary words. They would possibly read a text aloud or have the students read a text to support what they had seen or experienced in terms of the hands-on component. However, now the students make the knowledge themselves first and test out their new understandings with the hands-on component, which is a completely different model.
Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensured that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. First question, how did you support all students working with grade level text? For example, did you provide scaffolding for students below grade level so they can read grade level text?
Okay. Prior to the lesson, as I had indicated before, finding scientific texts that match the content I needed the students to understand, as well as the lexile level called for by the CCSS, was very difficult. So this text was actually slightly below the 4th grade level. Looking at their assessment results, I determined that none of the students in the classroom would have difficulty with the lexile level of this particular text. Therefore, I didn't employ any scaffolding strategies such as a pre-read or reducing the amount of text, because it simply wasn't appropriate in this particular lesson. I noted in the initial lesson that some students did struggle with the complexity of the text in terms of it was new scientific knowledge. They were struggling with the comprehension and their perception of their ability to comprehend the text. In order to address that, when I initiated the second lesson, I addressed it whole class, so that I didn't expect the students to have an easy time comprehending the text, that it is a new skill, it is difficult. I acknowledged the fact that it was a shift for them, and that I had anticipated it to be difficult. Speaking to this, as well as supporting the more or less confident readers in the class by frequent check-ins, making sure that they were getting positive feedback when they were able to identify the details and examples in the text that I was looking for, was really how I supported the students that, although could read the text at the lexile level, struggled with their confidence ability. And I saw a huge improvement in the second lesson.
Continuing on that question, How did you create opportunities for the students who are advanced to engage more deeply?
Okay. In this particular lesson, I did not make any adjustments for students who were reading at above that Lexile level, simply because, again, based on test results and observations of the students, although the students that were more advanced in terms of their reading ability, they struggle with identifying details beyond the initial maybe main idea or definition. They are used to getting the answers quickly and easily, and the task itself really asks students to go back into the text and pull out multiple ideas or key pieces of information that the author had included about each scientific concept. This is an area that all of the students struggled in, regardless of their ability to read at a particular Lexile level.
How did you know the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent questions and tasks with precision?
The evidence I was looking for to demonstrate that students were able to be successful in meeting the standards of this lesson was their ability to identify more than one key idea about each term on their graphic organizer. About 40 to 50% of the students were able to do that on multiple terms. I also wanted to see if they were able to differentiate between important information regarding the term and an example the author used, because negotiating between the information and how the author uses his examples really helps them strengthen their comprehension over more abstract scientific concepts.
Did students acquire the literary skills addressed in the lesson, and what did you do for students who did not acquire the literary skills?
Okay. The students, as it was a, let me start that one again. Okay. As this is an early lesson in a sequence of lessons that I plan to do with the students around reading and comprehending nonfiction text in science class, all students have not met the standard I was looking for. However, I feel confident that most students made progress towards it. They are working on understanding the importance of being able to read and comprehend science text, and will over time become more comfortable with their ability and confident in their ability to pull out key ideas, ask questions to clarify, and begin to construct their own knowledge around scientific ideas. For students that are demonstrated more difficulty with the task, I would, in the next use of text in the science classroom, I would use small group instruction, I would adjust my partnerships, and what I would most likely do for some of my readers that, although they are able to read the Lexile level, but are less confident in the text, I would use a pre-reading strategy or allow them to use technology that would give them audio access to the material as well.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson, and what actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Okay, I think the indicator from Core Action 3 that the students best exemplified was their ability to provide textual evidence to support answers and responses. As you note in the lesson, I continually probe the students to go back to the text. Within science, one of the most interesting things about teaching science is all students come to school with some conception about whatever you're talking about. They've experienced it. It's a study of the natural world. So really getting the students to determine between what is in the text and what they're focused on at that moment and their prior knowledge or their own experiences can be challenging, but also is a very important piece of teaching science, because you have to directly address their misconceptions. So by asking them continually to go back to the text, show me where it said in the text that where that example was, where the evidence was, is how I'm building the habit of the students to really discern where they're getting their information and eventually analyze the validity of it.
Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
Reflecting on the lesson, I think one of the things that I would do differently in this fourth grade classroom is break down smaller sections of the text. I might not have used the entire text as a lesson in its entirety. What I would probably do next time is focus on the component where the author was using a mental model and step away and have them create some models to reinforce that concept. I would come back to the text again, analyze the components of the circuit, have them break down the text there, and then move into that hands-on component. I think focusing on the text and having them spend that type of mental energy for such an extended period was strenuous, and I think they will absolutely build that stamina, but it will require time to do so.
Last question. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
The initial lesson, I was surprised at the difficulty the students had.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Yeah. Oh,
Let me pause.
So, yep, that's the stair.
All right. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
In the initial lesson, I was a little surprised at the attitude some students had towards the task in terms of their confidence in reading the text and pulling out key information. I had several students that felt as though they could not accomplish that task. That surprised me. By addressing it in the second lesson and using positive reinforcement and helping them build their confidence, I was very pleased to see students gain a confidence within that text and become more proficient with it, simply from changing their perception of themselves. I was also very pleased and excited about the students' reaction to acknowledging it was difficult, and I was also pleased to see them more ready to engage in that difficult work the second day. I think that they knew what to expect. They knew that it wouldn't be quick and easy, and that they were a little bit more up to the task than the first day. I am going to look forward to continuing working with this type of task and see the students' confidence grow and their stamina build and their ability to discern scientific information out of text and to be applied to their hands-on experiences over time.
Good work, you're done.
Yay.